As of the day of recording this, it has been 36 consecutive calendar days since the Pittsburgh Steelers have completed a pass over 20 yards down the field. In the last 5 games combined, they are 0 of 13 with 3 picks. EJ, I challenge you to find me a more grotesque stat than that.
Lucky for you, I have one. It is not a Steelers stat. It is unfortunately a Vikings stat. And we talked last week about the fact that the Vikings were in a weird place. And if Brosmer played well, he could really put the Vikings in a pickle. Unfortunately, his first start was at Lumen Field against Mike Mack. And the too long didn't read version is it did not go well. So between 2011 and 2025, if you're looking at undrafted quarterbacks who were early starters in their first season, in terms of individual games, the effort, and I'm going to put effort in air quotes, that Max Brosmer put together yesterday at the Seahawks was the worst by far. And we're just going to throw the graph up because it's kind of hard to explain how much worse it is than all the other performances that we would consider similar. He had a negative 0.89 EPA per play in Seattle, which means he did absolutely nothing, and in fact, yes, helped the Seahawks win.
I would like to rescind last week when I said it couldn't possibly get worse. That was worse. So, yeah, J.J. McCarthy, he's starting again this week. There is no quarterback controversy. He's the guy. Like, that was... I genuinely do feel awful for Vikings fans because that was really hard to watch, and I'm not even a Vikings fan. I felt immediately bad for them like 8 minutes into the game. And I think what made me feel the worst about it is that there's not an easy way out of this. Like this wasn't just like, we have a great starting quarterback and we're throwing in the backup, and if we lose, fine, whatever. This impending sense of dread where a lot of Vikings fans almost felt like Brosmer was like their last great hope for the year, and it got even worse, and they're staring down the barrel of hoping that McCarthy improves in 2026 after going to a new quarterback coach this coming offseason, and like while also seeing Sam Darnold succeed and while also seeing Daniel Jones succeed. Like, I've seen Vikings fans go from, in the course of 2.5 months, go from we're going to challenge for the number 1 seed in the NFC to that one draft pick set us back half a decade. And I don't think there's a worse place for a fan base to be in than, oh my God, we're about to be bad, and we're about to be bad for a long time.
Yeah, there's no easy fix. Like you said, this isn't a snap your fingers and make it better. Even if they were to somehow get the number 1 overall pick, which they're not going to, and drafted a starter that even worked out, it would still be 2 years from now until they were challenging, and some of their roster will have aged out. So there is no snap your fingers and, reverse the Infinity Stones. It's not happening. They're at where they're at, and they're going to be there for a bit.
Well, we have a lot of actual positive things to talk about on this show today. I promise you, no more Steelers talk, no more Vikings talk. We're going to talk about some fun teams, including the Broncos, the Panthers, the Bears, who all of a sudden are the number 1 seed in the NFC. So believe me, Vikings fans, when I say you could be really bad and then suddenly correct yourself in a couple years, you just have to get the right quarterback and hire the right coach, and also nail the offensive line rebuild and get really good weapons and get a really good running back on late days. There's a lot you got to do, but it's possible. If the Chicago Bears did it, the Minnesota Vikings could do it too. So we have a lot of good stuff to get to today. Neil, please roll the intro. Welcome to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett Coleman. That's EJ Snyder. And I got to tell you, going into this weekend, I did not think we were going to start the show, let alone include it at all. But I didn't think we were going to start the show with Broncos Commanders on Sunday Night Football. That was one of the most fun games I've watched this year. It was completely unexpected. highly entertaining. I'm not saying it was the best football I've seen this year, but my God, it was good television. And it kind of came from out of nowhere, not going to lie.
Every year there are games like this come December that you look at the schedule and 9-2 Broncos rolling into Washington to face the 3-8 Commanders did not have the makings of this is going to be a great game written all over it, but the NFL has a weird way of evening things out. And yes, we got a banger of a Sunday night game in terms of, just like you said, you didn't have to be a fan of either team. It was just good television. It was pretty compelling. 95 pass attempts in this one. I also would not have bet on that. Denver had 45. Washington had 50 in December outdoors. What is happening? Cats and dogs living together. Why, you might ask? Well, Denver could not run the ball. RJ Harvey, 13 rushes, 35 yards. That is a blistering 2.7 per, was the Broncos' leading rusher. For Washington, they threw because they needed to keep pace to get points. They could run the ball. McNichols and Krosky Merritt combined for 10 rushes for 50 yards, 5 a pop, very respectable, but they were chasing for a lot of this game, so they had to get chunk yards through the air to keep up, and they did. And that was supposed to be impossible. That was the whole setup for this game, is that Denver has this voracious pass rush and a great secondary, and you can't throw against them. Denver's vaunted pass rush had 5 total pressures in true pass situations in this one. 5. They are averaging 14.5 per game through 12 games this year. That is an incredible job by Washington's offensive line, including rookie right tackle Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon. And behind that line, Marcus Mariota stood in there and fired, which he has been doing all year. We've actually mentioned his name a couple of times on the podcast this year as a guy that keeps popping up in random stats when you're looking through. And among quarterbacks with 200 dropbacks, again, Mariota had a quarter of that last night, which is crazy. Mariota is number 1 in ADOT, 10.1 yards per target in terms of target depth, and second in big-time throw percentage, behind only the aforementioned Sam Darnold at 6.3%. So if you're looking for next year's Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold reclamation candidate, he's probably at the top of the list. I think he's going to get a shot, not only because he's played pretty well, he's really experienced, he could be available, and there's a lot of QB needy teams and not a lot of quarterback supply, certainly in the draft this year. And again, if you're trolling through the free agent / trade market, there's not that many guys that are going to be able to be, pried off a roster for a low price. And Mariota's shown enough this year that I think he definitely can be that bridge starter for somebody and might outplay that expectation.
So what you're saying is future Steelers legend Marcus Mariota.
Do you know how many people said that in the comments when I said that? You're saying, oh, so it was either Vikings or Steelers, the two teams we opened the show with. They're like, oh, so you're saying
both
he's a
like,
future
it can't
Viking.
be worse. It can't be worse.
Get us anything, man, anything. And I'm sure they watched that performance last night and thought, well, that's a heck of a lot better than what we've been rolling out for several weeks. So there is going to be demand for sure. Those aren't the only teams that might be interested, but Mariota's had a very nice kind of quiet season again. Washington's not crushing it in the standings, so a lot of people stopped watching, but I think, again, national TV game, duels the Broncos to the standstill, doesn't quite get it. Almost, could have won it on the very last play of the game. Didn't quite get enough air into that pass. Nick Bonito makes a great play, but I was really happy for him. I always felt like he never really got going in the NFL, and he's almost had a much better career as a backup and might play his way back into being a starter, which is a cool story.
At minimum, he's kind of secured his spot in the league for a while. He's been in the league for a decade at this point, but he's still going to have several more years left because he can give you this, right? Like when you're in a spot, when you desperately need it, you're late in the game. He mounted an 18-play drive to get down there and keep them in the game. Like against one of, I don't want to say the best. I think Houston's the best. One of the best defenses in the NFL. Like you said, great secondary, great pass rush, great play caller on defense, and he kept him going for 18 plays to get points on the board. That's what keeps you in the NFL if you can do that. Now, on the flip side of things, I don't want to bag too much on Bo Nix because it was a very Bo Nix-ish kind of game. There were ups, there were downs. There was an incredible touchdown throw where he was kind of like, matrixing himself to the right and hit that one, while also having one of the dumbest interceptions ever. Like Bobby Wagner, I think, moved a grand total 9 inches to get that ball. That's Bo Nix, right? It's just what you're going to get. You're going to get ups, you're going to get downs. You hope that it kind of evens out over time. And I think because of that unevenness in the passing game and how dominant this defense has been, people look at the Broncos as one of, these stereotypical ball control defensive teams where you hope the quarterback doesn't screw it up. And we didn't really see that until the fourth quarter in this game. This was actually one of the least Broncos-ish type Broncos games for the first 75% of it until we got to the fourth quarter, and then it was very much a Broncos kind of game. And what I mean by that is they're not a ball control team. Their offense is actually very bad at controlling the ball. They're almost like the bizarro version of that, where their defense controls the game until their offense eventually puts something together late in the game. Like, they almost beat you through volume rather than through efficiency, which a lot of the best teams we've talked about beat you through efficiency rather than volume. The Broncos are the exact opposite of that, and they can only get away with it because their defense is so good. So what do I mean by that? Again, first 75% of this game was not very Broncos-ish at all because they actually scored. So for the season, Denver is 23rd in scoring drive percentage, which is 36.7%. They are 18th in touchdown drive percentage, which is better, but again, still below average. They are 4th highest in punt percentage, which is not where you want to be. And they are 9th lowest in turnover percentage, which is where you want to be. So the one thing they have going for them is they punt a lot, but they don't give it away, right? So they make opposing offenses start with bad field position. That works in their favor because their defense is so good. They are dead average in time of possession per game at actually on the wrong side of the 30-minute mark. They're at only 29.50 a game, but they have the most drives per game at 11.6. And so what that tells you when you add those two numbers together is that it takes them a lot of possessions just to get to average time of possession. That is not a ball control team. That is actually one of the least efficient overall offenses in the NFL when you look at it that way. The good thing is that their special teams, particularly their punt unit, which is very experienced this year, and their defense are so good that they just kind of win through attrition and almost like moving the ball forward 10 yards at a time when they're just swapping punts with teams. Because if they can just get one more first down than you do when they punt and then you punt, if they can punt from the 50 and you're punting from the 20, inevitably they're going to win on field position. And if they can just get you to the fourth quarter, especially when they're at home and teams get a lot more tired in the fourth quarter in Denver, that's when they can just kind of finish teams off. We've seen that multiple times this year. And so to me, that is not a ball control team. That is an attrition team, but you get ground down by the defense, not by the offense. And they've typically just relied on Bo to make enough plays to keep them in it while the defense makes his margin for error as easy as possible. When you go up against a quarterback, though, in the playoffs, which we typically see better quarterbacks in the playoffs, my question is, will the defense keep being able to do that? Because if they falter even a little bit, we have not seen an efficient enough Broncos offense for me to think that they'll still be able to climb out of that hole. They make it work and they win all these games because the defense keeps it close enough that they can get to the fourth quarter. What happens if they can't? Right? What happens if a team like really takes it and runs with it and builds a huge lead that Bo Nix just can't climb out of when they get to the fourth quarter? That's what I'd be worried about as a Broncos fan, is when can we actually be even average efficiency on offense? So far, I haven't really seen that this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry so much about getting in a huge hole with that defense, but I'd be more worried about running up against a defense that is just as good or even slightly better than yours, and they are out there. And if you do that, I don't think a Bo Nix-led offense is going to give you any margin for error, and they might not be able to score more than field goals. And if that's the case, yes, you can keep it close, but you get back down to the quarterback equation, which does tend to matter more in the playoffs. If their quarterback's better than yours, and that's, I'm going to say, somewhat likely if your quarterback is Bo Nix, And their defense is really good, and you're locked in kind of a very similar struggle where both defenses are locking down offenses, but their quarterback can make a few more plays, which you said it perfectly. Denver has counted on Bo Nix to be just that guy. I don't have any data to back it up, but it always feels like the end of the half, whether it's the end of the first half or whether it's the end of the game. And Bo Nix suddenly just lights it up for one drive at the end of the first half and, at the end of the game, and they end up scoring 17 or 20 points. And that's enough because their defense is so suffocating. If they come up against their mirror image and the other quarterback is better, they could very easily be one and done in the playoffs, which would be very disappointing to Denver fans because it is a good team. It's a well-coached team. There's a lot of talent on it, but right now that offense is not leading them anywhere.
And I know the natural response from Broncos fans, and I'm sure some of you already typed it and hit enter in the comments while EJ was talking. Like, well, we beat the Texans, earlier this season, and they're just as good of a defense, if not better than we are, and we beat them. Please do remember, CJ Stroud got concussed in that game. He only threw 10 passes. Davis Mills threw 30. That to me is not the same. If there is a rematch in the playoffs, am I saying that Houston would beat Denver? I'm not saying that, especially because it feels like Houston at this point would be on the road at Denver. In fact, not even feels like, that's what would happen. But if we take out that Texans game, or rather take out that, the injury to CJ Stroud during that game, would it have gone the same way? I'm not so sure that it would have, right? And this is no slander against Davis Mills. He actually did a wonderful job filling in. Went 3-0 as a starter for them. He's still not as good as CJ Stroud, in my opinion. So, again, I know that's the natural reaction for Broncos fans to jump in and defend and say they've won that kind of game. I still think that Broncos fans deep down inside are worried. In fact, I know they're worried because it feels this is leading to some matchup in January where we get to the third quarter and it's like 13-6, Denver being in a hole. And, all of the thoughts that Broncos fans have kind of pushed to the back of their brain throughout the entire season of like, come on, guys, do the thing. Like, all of that is going to creep up at once. And like, once you're in the playoffs and you really only have 30 minutes left in your season, you don't get to look forward to like bouncing back the following week. All of a sudden, all of those demons rush back in at once. And you're like, oh God, are they going to be able to get 7 points in these next 2 quarters of action? Like, are they actually going to do the thing that we've been waiting for them to do for 3.5 months? Because at this point, they haven't really, at least not consistently. They've had really hot quarters here and there. Like, they've had some incredible fourth quarter comebacks that were aided by colossal mistakes by their opponents. But like, when you get to January and you have 1 quarter, 2 quarters left, you're in a hole. All of a sudden, all of the doubt that you've suppressed during the regular season comes back, and you're like, can they actually do this? Can they actually win this way against really good teams in the playoffs? I'm not saying they can't, but as a Texans fan, I remember that 2016 team. I remember the early 2010s team. In fact, there's more teams in Texans history that were great defense, bad offense than there were great offense, bad defense. And I'll tell you what, every single time one of those Texans teams went to the playoffs and they got into a hole early, those thoughts crept in for me of like, ooh, that recipe worked really good against like a bad Raiders team in November. Can it work against insert AFC contender here? You don't realize how worried you are about it until you get to that exact moment. So again, I'm not saying Broncos are screwed, but in no universe should this game against Washington have been this difficult. I'll put it that way.
It's funny, just you describing that feeling is reminding me and giving me that feeling in the pit of my stomach that you get watching a playoff game of, oh, he just threw a pick midway through the third quarter. They need 7. They haven't been able to score it on good days. Is this a good day? And the clock starts ticking really loud at that point. That's the increase, ratchet up of pressure in the playoffs that make the NFL playoffs great. But just you talking through that was sort of reminding me of that twisting of the gut when you're like, I'm not so sure.
I mean, look at how many Bears teams were the same way, where it's
trust me.
They're going to hold them to 20, but can we actually get 21?
I come by this honestly. It's a lot of experience with that exact scenario of, ooh, they just made a mistake. Can they overcome it? I don't know. Even on a good day, they're having trouble doing that.
One quick break, then we'll get right back to it, I promise. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Ridge. I've got my Ridge wallet right here on camera if you're watching the video version of this show. It's a lot sleeker and smaller than I'm used to having. You know, for many years I've carried around a giant leather monstrosity that has all of my cards and cash and loose change, gift cards, basically everything that I own all in one place. And this is a lot more freeing. After all, you don't have to carry everything all the time, as I've come to find out. Now, Ridge doesn't just have wallets, though. If you're shopping either for yourself or for a loved one this holiday season, they make rings and wedding bands, they make power banks, phone cases, watch straps, even weatherproof, impact-resistant luggage, if that's what you need. The whole catalog is massive. But even if you're just looking for a simple wallet at the end of the day, they've got 50 different colors. They've done collaborations with every NFL team, every MLB team, even your favorite college team. There's just so much there. So if literally any of that interests you at all, go check out their entire catalog over at ridge.com/bootleg. Again, that is RIDGE.com/bootleg. And if there's something there that you like, you're in luck, because right now their biggest sale of the year is going on. You can get up to 47% off. Again, ridge.com/bootleg for up to 47% off. Thank you once again to Ridge for sponsoring today's show. And with that, let's get back to it. Now, as for a team that absolutely is a real, honest-to-God, ball control team, the Carolina Panthers. I don't want to say that they can win only one way, but it sure seems like all of their wins look the same, which is pounding the rock and then pounding the rock again and again and again and again and not turning it over. And then you look up at the end of the game and they've won by anywhere between 2 and 4 points by just sticking with their identity and bludgeoning you until you give up. Or die, I guess, is preferable for them. The Rams, I really don't think they were overlooking Carolina. I don't think that that's what this was. Like, they were not looking ahead to, a rematch with Seattle or anything like that. I think they took the Panthers seriously. It's just, this is a team in Carolina where if you turn it over against them, like if you give them life, you basically lose. And the splits for this are actually kind of remarkable. They're 5-1 in games where they win the turnover margin. They are 2-4, or really technically 2-5 if you include the New England game where there were no turnovers, so they were even. But they're 2-5 in games where they either go even in the turnover margin or negative. They are a boa constrictor if you give them that extra possession or if you give them that little bit better field position. If you make them work for it, or rather, if they work against themselves, by Bryce or in one case, Andy Dalton having like an apocalyptically bad multi-turnover game, yeah, they're not explosive enough to dig out of that hole. But if you make their life even a little bit easier, you will lose to this team.
We knew this was going to be a multi-year process, and right now the Panthers are 7-6 and second in the NFC South, behind only the Bucs, who are 7-5, having played one less game. There's a very real world where the Panthers make the playoffs. Over the final month, they play the Saints, which should be a winnable game, although they did lose to the Saints previously. The Bucs, they're going to play twice. The split is certainly possible, especially with the way this team plays football. And the Seahawks, who got beat by the Rams, which is the team the Panthers beat yesterday. So your guess is as good as mine. But Dave Canales deserves a lot of credit in this one. He's found several ways to win this year. It hasn't been always the same way, always the same players, or always the same game plan. And as a result, he's got this under-leveraged roster that we talked about 2 years ago and this summer as, hey, there's still work to do. It's getting better, but they are still lacking players to compete with the top flight teams in the NFL. He's got this team playing up to its potential and sort of maximizing what they do have. And the fact that they've got a winning record and are in the hunt for the playoffs happens to be because they're in one of the worst divisions in football, is still a credit to him and his staff and the way they play football, the way they try and eliminate those mistakes and just be sort of the KC light version of that boa constrictor of we're going to play our own game, let you make mistakes and just stick with what we do. And if that works out, we'll beat you in the end. Not by very much, but we will beat you in the end. So like a lot of teams in flux, in this case, the Panthers are going from a team a couple of years ago that was an absolute cellar dweller to a team that can compete on a weekly basis. Some weeks they look amazing, and some weeks they fall off. There's just unpredictability. They haven't figured it out yet, for lack of a better term. They're learning through it. So they have quality wins. I'm going to put the Falcons in there from early in the season because it was a shutout, 30-0. Not that this Falcons team is amazing, but it's hard to shut out anybody in the NFL. They beat the Cowboys. They beat the Packers in Green Bay to hand LaFleur only his 13th home loss as a Packers coach. And of course, they beat the Rams. Then they have those unpredictable, weird losses. They lost to the Cardinals early in the season. As I mentioned, they lost to the Saints earlier, which are not a very good team this year, but they're going to play them again. And they lost 17-7 a month ago when they just came out flat. They did not play well. They didn't play to their script of, keeping it mistake-free, and it cost them. That's going to happen with teams like this. But the fact that they're even in this seat with a month to go in the season, basically trailing the Bucs by, at this case, half a game, they could totally win the NFC South and go to the playoffs, which would be a ridiculous accomplishment. And I'm just going to say Canales would be a dark horse for Coach of the Year at that point. And I don't think he'd win it, but he should be in the conversation given what he's working with.
He should at least be recognized, right? And I will say, so the Dallas win that you mentioned, that was early on in the year when Dallas's defense was still like horrifically, almost historically bad. Much different defense than it is right now. And that was also one of the only 2 games that they won when they had a negative turnover margin, because I think that was also the Rico Dowdle legacy game. The Miami game that they won early on in the year when Miami was still really, really, really bad. That was the other game that they won with a negative turnover margin. But the Saints lost, by the way. That was another one where they were negative in turnover margin. Buffalo blew them out completely because they were negative in turnover margin. Like really the only game where they played against a really good team where it was even when it comes to turnovers was New England, and New England put belt to ass basically from start to finish. But that was New England. New England's really good. So I don't really give them grief for that because I think New England would beat most teams in the NFL that way. But I do want to give credit for their style of play, because even though this team is 10th in terms of turnover percentage, they do give it away fairly often. Again, they're the opposite of Denver, where they're 30th in drives per game, which is 9.8, but they're 5th in plays per drive at 6.7. So they're really good at sustaining. They're really good at staying on the field. The possession count in these games is low, which is why these turnovers are so devastating, because they don't have a volume of possessions to make up for it, like, say, Denver does. But when they play that game and they just kind of keep control of the clock and keep control of the ball, like we've seen teams try to play that style against them and try to out-Panther the Panthers, and they couldn't do it. Like Green Bay tried to out-Panther the Panthers and lost, because when you try to play that style and you try to get in the mud and try to wrestle a pig, like they're comfortable. Like they would love for that. And so even though my one critique of them is that I really wish that they would be able to stretch the field a little bit more, and especially I'd love to see them rip off more explosive runs. They're 28th in explosive run rate. They're just average, like dead-ass average in explosive pass rate at 16th. I would love for them to get more chunks, but at the same time, they ran the ball 40 times against the Rams at 4.1 a clip. Like, that was just kind of a remarkable performance by them. I'm not saying it was like hyper efficient, but I mean, for God's sake, like you get worn down when that like any defense is going to get worn down. That's a really good Rams defense, and they capitalized on these high leverage situations. Like they had 2 touchdown passes on 4th down, both against Emmanuel Forbes, because I had to open my fucking mouth and say that he's having a good year. So then he gave up 2 4th down touchdowns.
I wasn't going to say anything. I
mean, I saw it coming a mile away too. As soon as I said like the age of the small quarterback was over and Forbes is having a good year, I looked at the schedule. I was like, "Fuck, it's about to be a massacre," and it was. But so that's my fault. That's my fault, Rams fans. I apologize. But like, I really respect this Panthers style because they know what they are. Like they know that they're not going to get chunk plays. They know that if they turn it over, they're screwed. But they're just going to kind of. I mean, hell, it's their motto. They're going to keep pounding over and over and over again. And if you make them bleed, they're okay with that. Like, corn does not care from whence it flows. They will drown you in that pool of their own blood as long as you die first. That is their mantra. And it works. It really, really, really works. So I really hope we get to see the Panthers in the playoffs. I almost hope for it as much as I want to see the Bears and the Texans in the playoffs, just because I find their chaos so endearing. And I know that teams don't want to see them in there because, again, you're playing with fire. Like, if you give them one extra possession, you're playing with fire, and you could lose very, very easily. So if they somehow win the NFC South and, like, the Seahawks got to go on the road to Carolina, buddy, that's going to be a better game than people think. I'm not saying it's going to be like the best football in the world, but it's going to be entertaining. Like, just like that Washington-Denver game, it's going to be damn good TV.
And Carolina doesn't panic. That's one of my favorite things about them is they don't go, well, we tried to run it for 3 quarters and, it didn't really work. So now we're just going to whip it all over the yard and then, lose terribly because they're just not good at that style. You said it. They know who they are and how they want to play football, and they just keep at it. Doesn't have to be super efficient. It's not super efficient. They know that. And you could almost see the Rams defenders yesterday being like, wait, you're gonna run it again? I mean, you've already run it like 25 times, man. You're going to run it like, okay, here we are. We got it. It's hard work. You got to set the edge. You got to close the gaps. Like, over and over and over again. And Carolina, to your point, is like, I saw Spencer said something about the Michigan game, and he was like, report from the first quarter of the Michigan game. I have been lured into a headbutting contest with a guy who headbutts. And I'm like, yep, that's it. They're going to drag you in a game where you're going to have to stop the run 30 or 35 times, which in the modern NFL is like 2 games worth. And they're going to make you do it in 4 quarters. And they are comfortable. They're like, come on down in the pit. We're going to do this. We're going to do this all day. And I appreciate that style of football, and it's working for them because they stick with it. They stay the course. They will not waver.
Just lovable little psychopaths over there in Carolina. I love them to death. I really do. All right. Speaking of that game, by the way, we got a Shot of the Week nominee from that game. Before we get to that, though, I got to announce the winner of last week's Bootleg Shot of the Week, brought to you by our friends over at Woodinville, which I have in my glass right now. This is just like the baseline Woodinville. I'm saving the good stuff for a future show.
Oh, I'm not.
Oh, you poured it?
It's here. It's in the glass. I got to pick it up the day before Thanksgiving. They called me and let me know that it was bottled and stickered up and ready, and it will be released really soon. I know there's a lot of curiosity around it. We hear you. We're not holding out on you. We're just trying to make sure everything's right and ready, and we are going to release it at a given time on a given day, and you all will have prior notice. So everybody has an equal shot because, again, there's only about 130-ish bottles of this available. It's going to be on Woodinville's website. It's the only place you can get it. And yes, I had it for Thanksgiving. I got to share a little bit of it with my mom, and she is a fan, so it's Mom Snyder approved. And I like it. I did put it in the glass. I did put an ice cube in with it today because I have to do the rest of the show afterwards.
It is like $1.18, so I forgive you. Well, we have a hell of a winner for you to toast to because Darnell Washington dispatching not 1, not 2, but 3 Bengals defenders on one of my favorite catch and runs of the year is this week's Bootleg Shot of the Week winner. I thought Elijah Clark might have put up a little bit of a better fight there, but again, the Darnell clip is just so hilarious. If you want to see it, you can go to the Patreon. We do videos every single week that are publicly available with all the Shot of the Week nominees. So if you want to go back and watch that, as well as watch this week's nominees, you can find that over on the Patreon. But again, I got my shot. Cheers to you, Darnell. I want to say like 25% of all of the Shot of the Week winners this year have been named Darnell. I don't know what it is, but if you want your kid to play in the NFL, name him Darnell.
Yeah, I mean,
unless you look like me, then don't name him Darnell. Name him Darren. But, everybody else, Darnell.
Sure, you can either go with Darnell or you can go with Jalen, and your odds are pretty good.
This week's Shot of the Week nominees. Again, Latham Ransom, who I mentioned, coming downhill from 12 yards deep to lay the wood on Kyron in the red zone. Nominee number 2. Well, we actually have 2 nominees from the same game, which is the Vikings game that shall not be referred to again. First one, Leonard Williams, massive sack on Max Brosmer. One of his many welcome to the NFL moments in that game. Shot number 2, Jalen Naylor which sounds odd because he's a receiver. But if you go back and you watch Brosmer's, I think it was his second interception. God, that sounds way worse when I say it like that. It was one of his interceptions near the Seahawks end zone. And during the run back, you see Jalen Naylor just kind of like standing in the middle of the field, just waiting menacingly. Dropped his pads, bopped the ball out. Vikings got it back. Hell of a shot by him. He's also probably going to get paid this offseason too, if I had to bet. He's a good player. And then Mikey Sainristil from that extremely drunk Sunday Night Football game this week, delivering a massive shot on the boundary. Again, if you want to see videos for every single one of these plays, go to the Patreon. The poll for it is public. You don't have to be a patron to vote for Shot of the Week, but we'd, of course, appreciate if you did become a patron. We have more bonus content coming for all of our patrons later on this week. We're back to doing our 3 total show per week cadence. So that'll probably come out Friday, which is when EJ and I are also flying out to Kansas City for this weekend. And the reason why we're going to KC, by the way, is because the Dog Bowl is happening this weekend for our friends over at Underdog. So EJ and I are both going out for that, which is a very smooth transition to a quick little update on our Pick'em contest with Underdog. I'm going to put the top 10 leaderboard for this past week's contest winners on the screen right now. Again, if you win one of the weekly contests, you get $500 in Underdog credit. You get the bootleg mini helmet, merch, all that. We send it your way, and EJ collects your addresses and mails it himself for that. And then those all go into the season-long contest, where if you win the season-long contest, or rather if you're one of the top 10 for the season-long contest, top 3 get the bootleg full-size helmets. First prize gets $3,000 in Underdog credit, plus the full size and the merch. And also grand prize winner gets one of those Woodinville bootleg single barrel select bottles as well, which EJ is very helpfully holding up on screen right now. So again, check the leaderboard. That link is down in the description below, as well as in the pinned comment below. And if you aren't in the contest, but you want to be in the contest, you can sign up also at the link in the description below, enter your Underdog username and your email that gets tracked every single week. And even if you're new to Underdog, you can also play in this contest. Promo code bootleg when you sign up, you get $100. If you just play $5, you get $100 in Underdog credit. So thank you to Underdog for providing all the resources for running this contest. Congratulations to our weekly winners. We've had a few so far, and congratulations to our future season-long winners. They get a whole lot of prizes to boot. Now, next topic on the docket. Chicago Bears, EJ, are the number 1 seed in the NFC, and it's December. I don't remember the last time that happened. In fact, I'm not even sure I was alive.
It did. This is the latest the Bears have been atop the NFC since 2006. That's the year they went to the Super Bowl. And it is not familiar territory for Chicago fans. And for anybody doubting that Ben Johnson is the one, don't. I'm going to give you offensive rankings for Chicago 2024 versus 2025. I'm not going to give you all of them. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights. So points per game, 2024, the Bears were 28th at 18.2 points per game. In 2025, they are 8th at 26.1. That is a plus 20 spot change, plus over a touchdown a game, 7.9 points per game. This is a big one that I think a lot of people don't understand, like how destructive it was last year. First quarter points per game. In 2024, they were 32nd, dead last. They averaged 1.6 first quarter points per game. This year, they're 5th, 6.2 first quarter points per game. They jumped up 27 spots and plus 4.6 points. Rush yards per game, they were 24th last year. They're 2nd this year, a 22-spot jump. Pass yards per game, they were 31st last year. This year, they're 16th, plus 15 spots. And turnover margin per game, I'm going to include it because the offense is half of that equation. Last year, they were 7th at plus half a turnover a game. This year, they're 1st, 1.4. So again, 6-spot jump and almost a full turnover more per game this year. And they're still improving. So Ben Johnson was the guy. We thought he was going to be the guy. defeating the defending Super Bowl champs is at their house is the most significant victory in recent Bears history. And I say that with full confidence. Previous Bears teams, yes, they've pulled off some very interesting games, but nobody thought they were going anywhere because of it. When you look at the context, when you look at the build, when you look at the change week over week, the way he has this team competing and believing to march into Philadelphia, problems or not. I'm not saying the Eagles are in a good place. They're not. But to have the Bears go in and beat not only the defending conference champions, but also the defending Super Bowl champions on their home turf and do it pretty handily in front of a national audience, that is a watershed moment for the Bears. There is no other way to say it. Ben has this team right where he wants them. He has them improving, competing hard every week, and most importantly, I think, believing that they can beat any team on any given Sunday. They deeply and truly believe that in Chicago, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong. Add in, they're getting back some important players on defense down the stretch, and it makes Chicago a very dangerous team heading down the stretch. Not just, typically we were talking about dangerous Bears teams in December or January. It was like, well, they could spoil some chances. They could go kick mud in people's faces, and that'll teach them. Now it's not only can they do that, they could solidify a spot in the NFC playoffs that gives them some advantages and actually win some playoff games. If you go back to what we said about this team at the summer series, we said, look, if they have a winning record and they're improving and Caleb shows he's the guy, that's it. That's a win for Ben Johnson's first season. Really, it's going to be his second season where it all takes off. He's half a season ahead. They're not only most likely going to get into the playoffs, they could very easily win a playoff game this year. And that is not even something that I was willing to entertain in the summer. There were just too many moving pieces. He's basically made them all work despite serious games lost to injury. This is a very, very different Bears team. And no doubt about it, Ben Johnson is the reason for that happening.
We have talked for years about how this fan base is a sleeping giant. And when I tell you like how many like random like celebrities and creators that I see like talking about their Bears fandom every single, I'm like, you're a Bears fan? Like so many, like I didn't realize how many people were Bears fans until this season. Like so many people just kind of reemerging from the woods and finding their love of football again. And folks, I tell you, we have a lot of Bears fans that listen to the show, and for good reason, obviously. December 20th, if this team locks up the NFC North Christmas week, hosting the Packers in Chicago, and they win that game, I forgive all transgressions. I give you full immunity to the city of Chicago to just completely pop off, because the release that this fan base will feel if they exercise that particular demon, like securing the NFC North against the Packers in Chicago late in December. There are fans that have literally waited decades for that. Decades. I give you full immunity to react as obnoxiously as you want to, because we all know what Bears fans have been through. Like the Lions have bounced back. They've cemented their bounce back. They're out of the basement. The Vikings, even though they're miserable right now, like they've had some legitimately great runs in recent years. They went to an NFC Championship game. They had the Minneapolis Miracle. Like there's been some good times for Vikings fans. And obviously there's been great times for Packers fans as well for, I don't know, 30 years at this point. The Bears basically have 2006 and roughly 11 calendar months of Mark Trestman and like 1 year of 2018 Mitch Trubisky in how many decades? Like that's the only moments, like fleeting moments of happiness this fan base has had in 40 years. So yeah, if they win the NFC North, beating the Packers, you're going to see some shit. And I will allow it. I'll say that.
Yeah, I'll add one more, which is Cuddy breaking his thumb on the interception return.
Oh,
tackle.
Yeah. Oh, man.
That team was cooking. And I, again, being a Bears fan and well-conditioned, I couldn't truly believe in it, but it was I don't want to say a fitting ending, but it was like an of course ending to that particular run, and they were on a bit of a tear. A lot of fans still talk about that. But if that's all you're talking about in the last 3-4 decades, this has a very different feel to it. And I put out, you're talking about people coming out of the woodwork and the numbers, the legions of Bears fans starting to reemerge. I put out a tweet last week after they beat the Eagles, and I said, if you don't believe now, when will you believe? And it was an honest question on one hand, because I actually do wonder what the real answer for a fan is, and there's no right way to fan. I'm not going to tell you how to fan. But it was also you should enjoy this. I know you're not used to enjoying it, but these moments are fleeting for all sports fans. Sometimes you get a dynasty. It doesn't happen very often. More often than not, you get really good seasons. Sometimes they come at you really unexpectedly. And Bears fans, I wouldn't, begrudge you if you didn't realize that this was one of them until week 10 or 11. You missed a bunch of it. Like, get on board, and I'm with you, man. Enjoy it. Like, have a good time with it. This is a good football team. They're fun to watch. They're believing, and they're winning close games. And those are all sort of not Chicago Bears things of the recent past. So sort of cleanse your palates and get on the bus. There's plenty of room. This is a fun team. Watch them through the rest of the year. Even if they don't get into the playoffs, which I think they will, even if they don't win a playoff game, which they might not, they're not going away anytime soon. They got their quarterback. They got their coach. They solidified their offensive line. They have all their draft picks next year. Like, this is still a team that can be good going into the next year and the year after that. So celebrate this and don't hold your breath that it's all going to, balloon explode right after this year because they're over leveraged money wise, or they don't have any picks, or, they're losing their coach or anything else. This is a good time. Enjoy it while it's here.
I saw a clip, and I think it was from The Score, where they were like, "Oh, this is no longer a bonus year. Expectations have changed." I'm like, "Don't do that. Like, don't do that. don't put the weight of expectations on it. Like, don't act like this is a Super Bowl or bust year. Like, we didn't think that going into the year, so why would we think that now?" And like, yeah, it's the team's going to be the 1 seed. Well, not going to be, but they could be the 1 seed, and we hope that they're good enough to make a run. But by no means am I shifting my mindset of like, oh, division round is a disappointment. Like, fuck that. No way. I am not shifting my expectations, and I am not allowing the weight of expectations that I am foisting upon them in December. I'm not allowing that to set me up for disappointment when every single rational Bears fan hoped for like 500. Like, best case scenario, hope for 500. So I'm not going to allow that to turn this into a failed season.
No.
Just because they might get the 1 seed. Like, you can allow yourself to reset your expectations. I will not, because that is a one-way ticket to being really depressed about the best Bears season that's happened in a long time. I'm not doing that. I'm going to enjoy it. I am firmly enjoying Caleb's development, which is another thing I want to talk about before we move on. The way that you can see Ben Johnson's coaching in Caleb's play style is really striking to me, because this was a guy who I think he led the league in sacks taken last year. In fact, it was one of the most sacked quarterbacks ever, if memory serves me correctly. We are going into week 14 now, and he's only taken 19 sacks. They're top 5 in terms of sack percentage allowed. And if you're looking at not just how well the offensive line is playing, but also how well Caleb is helping out the offensive line on tape, he's doing a lot of the stuff that we praised when he was at USC, that he got away from in his rookie year when I don't know what Shane Waldron was teaching him, if at all, but he got away from a lot of the pocket skills that we praised at USC. And we're seeing him do it again, right? Where he'll intentionally go to a 10-yard depth, trying to bait edge rushers to go deep and take a wide angle where Darnell can obviously just kind of catch and kill at that point. And then he'll step up, like really dramatically step up and force edge rushers to then try to retrace and come inside. And then he'll step back again. Like, the way he positions himself within the pocket to make his tackles' jobs easier. I mean, Darnell's already an all-pro caliber tackle as is, but if you have a quarterback who is on the same page of his tackle in terms of constantly putting himself I almost think of it like the parallax of a camera, where like a long lens camera focusing on an object and you're rotating around it. It's going to look like the background is moving really fast. I don't even know if this analogy holds, but there's like a very small point on the Venn diagram of camera nerds and Bears fans that are going to understand this. When Caleb is maneuvering himself in the pocket to consistently keep his tackles in between him and the edge rusher, that is then translated in how well their protection is holding up. That is translating in the low sack rate. It's not just about Caleb getting out of stuff, which he's been excellent at getting out of stuff, but it's how he limits the pressure against him, period, just through pocket movement. And we can see that reflected in the stats. I pulled all this from Sumer Brain. These are mind-blowing numbers, but they're backed up on film. As I said, they're fifth in sacks taken percentage, 11.45%, 19 sacks on 166 pressures. But here's the kicker, though. When looking at pressure percentage allowed, though, they're 12th. They're not fifth. They're 12th in just raw pressure percentage allowed. And their time to throw on those pressures is 2.84 seconds. That's not quick. In fact, if you're looking at the top 10 teams in terms of pressure percentage allowed, they're all at 2.25, 2.35, 2.4. Like there's one that's 2.5 seconds. In fact, I don't think any of them are over 2.5. The Bears are sitting there at 2.84. What that tells you is that Caleb is holding on to the ball a long time, but he's doing such excellent work in the pocket while holding the ball that the pressure rate is still low because he's helping out his offensive linemen by giving them the best possible angles to hold their blocks for a long time. And we even see that reflected in time in pocket. The Bears have the longest average time inside the pocket per dropback at 3.01 seconds. They're the only team that's at 3 seconds. And they've only allowed a pressure rate of 31.59% when Caleb is in the pocket. That's the fourth best pressure rate allowed when the quarterback is in the pocket. So yeah, he holds it for a long time, but he's doing excellent work when he's in there. And in fact, his average time to throw is lower when he's outside the pocket than when he's in the pocket because he's so damn good in the pocket. So yeah, the offensive line is excellent, but when the only other teams that are quote unquote better than the Bears in terms of allowing pressures against the quarterback in the pocket, when those teams are Miami, whose average time to throw is 2.47, when the Steelers, their average time to throw is 2.55, and the Rams are at 2.6, and the Bears are all the way up at 3, that's Caleb. That's Caleb doing wizard shit inside the pocket and making his offensive line's lives easier. So I think he needs credit for that. It's such a weird kind of wonky stat that I don't know if it's ever been brought up before, but like you can see it translate on tape with how well he's managing, these pass rushers. And like that to me right there has been one of the catalysts for the offensive improvement because they're not taking dumb sacks anymore and falling off script. And, when you get into 2nd and 25, you're not going to run the ball well when you're in 2nd and 25 because you got to throw it over again.
When you talk about how that's allowed to happen, there was no way physically for that to happen last year because they played with an inordinate amount of offensive line combinations in front of Caleb. There was no chance to develop that stability and chemistry that's absolutely necessary for that kind of high-level operation between the line and the quarterback where there is understanding. Week after week, they can go into the film room and say, that's how that worked. Okay, on this one, this is how I'm going to play it, or expect me to do this, or I'm going to do this just like I did it on that last one that we were looking at, and build that sort of Bible over the course of a season to say, this is how we operate. By this time of the year, everybody has that sort of imprinted on their brain, and the same guys, for the most part, besides a little bit of rotation at left tackle, are there and have all that sort of institutional knowledge, that combined knowledge that allows that to happen. There's just no way for that physically to occur last year because they played so many different linemen at so many different spots. And the results were, I'll say, predictable. Disjointed. They looked like nobody knew what the other guy was doing. They allowed a ton of sacks. It broke so many drives. And the offense was, as I read off at the beginning of this segment, much, much worse. Again, the 2024 ranks just for the columns that I read off, 28th, 32nd, 24th, 31st. That was last year. This year, 8th, 5th, 2nd, 16th. That's what happens when you invest in the offensive line, you get continuity, and people do the work to learn, and you allow that offense to just flow. And yes, it is not traditional. He's doing it in a very different way. It's taking longer than almost everybody else, but the results you can't argue with. So if you want more Bears talk, if you're a bootleg fan and you don't get enough Bears talk, check out my other Bears podcast, Bear Era. It's on YouTube. We talk about the Bears every week, once a week. So check that out if you're just getting on the bus and want to enjoy more Bears content.
And for once, it's actually good Bears things that he gets to talk about.
Fun. Oh my God. I can't tell you how fun it is to every, Sunday and Monday start putting the agenda together with the guys and be like, man, what do we want to talk about? Like, we have too much good stuff. It's 7-Eleven, too much good stuff. Or is that AM, PM? I can't remember. Anyways, we have lots of fun topics every week, and that has not been the case, especially late in the year. For years now, you know how it is. If you are covering a team and it gets into December and they are completely hopeless, it's not fun to stand up there every week and come up with another storyline. With the Bears this year, it's a joy.
Yeah, I feel bad for whoever's doing like the Locked On Raiders show. Maybe 5 pods a week covering this team. Like, more power to you.
Yeah.
Godspeed.
Today's
show is brought to you by Chubbies, who conveniently recently got an NFL license, so now they can make team apparel like the Seahawks polo that I have on right now. Beyond these performance polos, they also have swim trunks and mesh shorts for every single team and every single fan base. Or even if you're not a 49ers fan, but you just happen to really, really like George Kittle, they also have a whole line of apparel just with George. These are great for tailgates or pool parties or golfing or stuff that you're not really going to do this time of year anyway, but still, eventually, it's going to get warm again. So if you just want to future-proof your wardrobe, or maybe you want to shop for another NFL fan in your life for this holiday season, go check out the catalog over at Chubbies. And if you go to chubbyshorts.com/bootleg, you get a discount on your order as well. Again, chubbyshorts.com/bootleg. Check out the catalog, get that discount. And we thank you, Chubbies, once again for sponsoring the show. With that, let's get back to it. All right, last topic of the day. The zombie teams of 2025. It's no longer spooky season, but we're doing a little bit of a spooky topic today. Zombie teams are basically, well, not basically. They are pretty much dead, but not like entirely dead. And they're still just kind of hanging around, chewing on brains and ruining everybody else's season.
Yeah, to paraphrase The Princess Bride, they've been mostly dead all season. So what is a zombie team? Teams that wildly underperformed in the first half of the season, so much so that the bulk of NFL fans, even fans of their team, just kind of looked away and averted their eyes from the disaster and said, maybe next year. And then they kind of rose from the grave and are playing competitive football while nobody's watching in the back half of the season. And every season, there are a few teams that follow this pattern. This year's zombies, we're going to highlight 3 of them. We're going to go through why they got written off for dead, what happened when they got infected with the zombie virus, and where they sit currently and what that really means or if it matters. But this year's zombies, we have to start off with the Miami Dolphins, why they got written off for dead. Lost 6 of their first 7 and fired their GM in the process. Yep, that'll do it. That'll kill your season right quick. Got infected with the zombie virus, beat the snot out of the Falcons 34-10, and have won 4 of their last 5 while nobody's paying attention, unless you're maybe a Devon Achane fantasy owner. There's one of those in this house, but it's not me. So we watch Dolphins games every week. Currently, they are 5-7 and extremely unlikely to make the playoffs. That is a 1% current chance. They need a lot of breaks to go their way. But they're playing decent football, and they are free of any expectations. You just talked about this with the Bears. Like, don't move the goalposts and put expectations on it. Well, all expectations for the Miami season was removed about halfway through when they fired their GM. And a funny thing happened. They started playing pretty good football.
If you're looking at the core identity of what this team is now, a lot of it is what we had praised in the offseason when we were going through the summer series of like, oh, I think that their identity is shifting in terms of winning the line of scrimmage. This team is 11th best in terms of rushing defense EPA per play allowed, and they're 9th best in terms of rushing offense EPA per play generated, which is what we talked about in the summer. Now, I foolishly bought into it, and I was like, I think the locker room, now they got rid of Jalen, I think the locker room will improve. Like, they still had the Tyreek thing to deal with, but, like, they can manage just one weird personality. And I thought that McDaniel was going to rally the troops and that the roster infused enough talent in the line of scrimmage that they could at least be a solid team. And that went tits up pretty quickly. Not going to lie. I immediately regretted that about 3 weeks into the season. But somehow, in the back half of the season, and I'm not saying that the Tyreek Hill injury was good, but it felt like when Tyreek got hurt and the focus of the offense went away from the pass game and really more towards leaning on what they were good at, which was feeding the running backs as well as just playing really good run defense and just kind of taking control of the line of scrimmage and taking control of the pace of the game. It felt like once they got away from the high-flying Dolphins of years past and really turned into that, they became a better team. Like, truly, they became a much, much better team. And a lot of their young trench talent is kind of rounding into form. I still, if it was me, I would have kept Jalen Phillips, but clearly they feel like he's not in a long-term plan, so they wanted to just get a pick out of it, because if he wasn't going to be there long-term, you might as well do that. I get it, but I still think that Jalen Phillips is a really good player. I would have kept him, but they just disagree on that. But if you're looking at what they're building, like, I think Kenneth Grant is going to be a hit. I think Patrick Paul, who they didn't take this year, they took him last year, but I think he's going to be a hit. Jonas Savaiinea has had a lot of struggles, not going to lie, but I think he is improving. I think eventually he will be a hit. You know, Ollie Gordon's had his moments as like a short yardage, kind of big body back. Like Jordan Phillips, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention him as a 5th-rounder contributor. Like, he's effectively a starter for them. Like, there's stuff to look forward to here. It's not the sexy stuff. It's not the stuff that got them headlines in years past when Tua was leading the league in passing, but like, it's a more sustainable foundation. And even if I think ultimately they're going to end up at like the 12th pick in the draft, that's a hell of a lot better than what they looked like they were going to be at the end of September, contending for the 1st overall pick. Like McDaniel has done a really good job of kind of bouncing back from that, and like, clearly his players didn't give up on him. I think the locker room was better than maybe we thought it was. So credit to the players, credit to him, and really credit to everybody involved in kind of turning this thing around. There are still deep flaws to fix there, but it's not as lost a cause as maybe people thought.
We were worried that everybody was just going to walk out of the locker room and wander off into the swamp at one point and just forfeit the rest of the games. It was very, very bad in Miami. And over the last month, they have gotten it back under control and are winning football games. So next zombie on the docket, the Bengals. Why they got written off for dead. The starting QB got injured early. They lost 8 out of 9 starting with week 3, including 4 in a row by a combined score of 140-55. So they weren't just losing, they were getting blown out. Their defense was abjectly terrible. They traded away a bunch of talent. And everybody stopped paying attention. Got infected with the zombie virus, beat the Steelers by 2 points on October 16th, 33-31. They lost to the Jets the next week. Well, that doesn't sound great, EJ. By a single point, 39-38, walk-off kick. They almost beat the Bears. We just talked about the Bears, but they lost in the final seconds. Loveland scored with 17 seconds left to make it 47-42, so they could have had a win over Chicago. They got smoked by the Steelers in the rematch, 34-12. They played the Patriots tough. Again, if you looked at the early season Bengals and saw that Patriots matchup looming, you would have said they're going to get pantsed. They only lost by 6 points to the best team in the AFC. Then they raised their hand up just high enough out of the grave yesterday to beat the rival Ravens 32-14. They are currently 4-8. They're not going anywhere this year, but they are a potential spoiler for teams that need wins down the stretch.
Okay, I get it. I don't mean to interrupt. 4-8 sounds bad. They're
Yes,
only
it does.
2 games back, dude. They're 2 games back with 5 to go. They're a game away from being a game away. And they still have to play the Ravens again. Like, they have to beat the Bills, but the Bills aren't like as much of a juggernaut as in years past. Like, that's a winnable game, especially with Joe and Jamar. And I don't know if I think T's back. I'll have to double check on that. And yeah, the defense is still an issue, but when you get a bunch of turnovers, yeah, they're fickle, but like we're 5 games to go. Just give me a few good weeks in a row, and we know that Joe can put points on the board. Again, they're a game away from being a game away. Like if they beat Buffalo and the Ravens drop another game, all of a sudden I think you're playing for the division at home. With 4 weeks still to go in the season. All is not lost here. Like there's still a pulse, and it's actually a much more vibrant pulse than they had a week ago.
Yeah, they're going to have to do some things which are unlikely. And down the stretch, the 2 biggest games are the Bills next week and the Ravens rematch the week after that. And they have to win both of those games. They honestly have to win basically all their games at this point. They cannot afford to be dropping games. And this team hasn't been consistent enough to make me think, oh, yeah, it's lockdown. They're playing great football. They're still playing up and down football, but at the very least, if I was the Bills, I'd be a little bit worried. This wasn't the game you thought it was a month ago. And if I was the Ravens, I would be really worried because you just got pantsed by this team. So, again, interesting zombie that at the beginning of the year after Burrow went down, lost a ton of games in a row and looked absolutely terrible doing it. So, everybody pretty much gave up on them. Last zombie we're going to talk about for the day, the New York Jets. Why they got written off for dead. They lost 7 straight to start the season. Yeah, that'll do it, folks, especially in the Big Apple. Benched their starting QB, who was acquired in free agency this offseason. Then they got infected with the zombie virus, just like these other teams. They beat the team we just talked about, the Bengals, by 1 point. Everybody assumed they'd crawl right back in the grave and fade away after that. Like, that was the Jets' one moment of grandeur for the year. But they came out next week and beat the Browns 27-20. And everybody went, wait, what? The Browns? Look, not a great team, but a very good defense. Then they lost to a great Patriots team, 27-14, and a decent Ravens team, 23-10. But that's the thing about zombies. They don't stay dead. So they played a very tough game at home in lousy conditions yesterday. It was cold. If you didn't watch that game, there were super high winds, and then it started pouring at the end of the game. Lousy weather. And they beat the Falcons 27-24 behind Tyrod Taylor. One of the most zombie performances of the NFL season. Currently 3-9 with a 1% chance of making the playoffs, matching their division rival Dolphins, who they play next week, interestingly enough. But down the stretch, they could kick the chair legs out of a couple of teams, specifically the Jaguars, currently the 3 seed in the AFC, who they play in 2 weeks. And if the Jaguars overlook the Jets might just smack them because they are the classic nothing to lose team.
I was working on a video on my channel this week, and part of it was featuring Armand Membo and like just all of his wins as a pass protector against really good pass rushers, whether it was TJ Watt early on in the year, Trey Hendrickson, Jalen Phillips. And as I was putting all these clips in the timeline, a lot of it was like Justin Fields. And I was like, God, he runs from a lot of clean pockets. If they just had like a normal quarterback who didn't run from clean pockets.
Be normal?
Dude, like it's, again, I've paid attention to the Jets, but I haven't like broken down the Jets in detail since early on in the season. That was bad. Like that was bad quarterback play. It was really, really, really awful. And he would have these moments of explosiveness and make some crazy throws. But if we're talking like just down to down consistency and playing in structure and just being a normal quarterback, like all the stuff that we have praised Caleb for becoming over the last few months, just executing the play as it's designed to be executed and not leaving your tackles out to dry. Like it's almost like the exact opposite pocket skills of Caleb, where Justin Fields just makes Membu's job harder, but Membu is so good that he still managed to be great. Whereas Caleb, yes, he has Darnold right in front of him, but Caleb amplifies Darnold Wright's dominance. And, while putting together that cut up, I was like, God, it must be really hard to win with that. It must be really hard to win with a quarterback that you don't know where he's going to be from down to down. You don't know if he's going to see it quick enough to pull the trigger when the play is designed to have the trigger pulled. And it made me appreciate Tyrod, honestly, a lot. Because I'm like, that was just normal quarterback play. I'm not saying it was great, but it was normal. It was functional. And if that's what this team has been missing the entire time, like yeah, they traded away Quinn and they traded away Sauce, but they've got a lot of picks and they still have other good assets to build around. Like they have good young, not even good, they have great young offensive linemen. They have a young tight end we like. They have running backs we like. They have a receiver we like. They have other pass rushers we like. There's still talent here. They just needed a quarterback that wasn't a complete net negative on the play-to-play, down-to-down operation of a normal fucking offense. Like that's all they needed. And all of a sudden they start winning games. Now, yes, it was the Falcons. Yeah, that's a caveat, but at least they didn't completely fall on their face and they looked like a normal football team. I think to me, that's growth.
It absolutely is. And Tyrod is Tyrod. We're not trying to say that he's great or even a top half of the NFL passer. He's not, but he knows who he is. And he played gutsy football down the stretch. He needed to, pick up a couple of first downs with his legs. He's always been able to do that. Got just enough at the pylon still. All these years in the league, he had just enough to do it. He knew when to do it. It wasn't just a panicked reaction. And he's not somebody to lead them forward, but like the additions they've made sort of quietly and slowly, like John Mechie's had some nice showings. A.D. Mitchell had a touchdown. Like they're growing the talent base and they have a boatload of picks going forward. So again, these teams that play well in the back half of a season, even if they started off abjectly terrible, which all three of these teams did, these are the teams that tend to make noise the next year. If they make the right moves in the offseason, free agency, the draft, coaching if they need to, these are the teams that build a little something, build a core, sort of hold together despite all the wind and noise outside the locker room, and come back a little bit stronger the next year and have a bit of a hot start. Like that's where those teams come from, is teams that played well down the back half of the stretch when nobody was looking.
And I really don't think anybody was like, I can't imagine there was a lesser watched game this past week than Falcons Jets.
Dude,
now, you and I do it because we get paid to, but like most people probably didn't.
I straight up put up messages about it. Somebody was like, "Oh, Falcons Jets, that's devotion." I was like, "Buddy, I do this for a living. I do this every game, every week." But I understood where he was coming from, and I actually put up a post about Jets and Falcons fans trying to out-dread each other on Sunday because they're like, "No, we're worst in all the worst ways. We'll never be good." And the other fan base is like, "No, wait, you haven't seen anything yet. We're terrible in ways that you can't even imagine." Two very tortured fan bases, but the Jets they got a sneaky chance to not be the team that everybody thought they were for the first half of the season.
I mean, they have a lot of picks in the future, right? And they don't have a quarterback yet, but like Falcons fans aren't sure that they have a quarterback yet because Michael Penix, he's injured, so we're not going to get to see him for the rest of the year, but even when Penix was on the field this year, it wasn't exactly the most encouraging tape. So if the Falcons are looking at not having their first round pick and they're a 3-win team, the Rams are going to have their pick, which might end up being in the top 10. And they have a quarterback coming off of injury who they're not 100% certain is even the guy. Like, who's more miserable than Falcons fans right now, other than Vikings fans? But like, they're both in the same... They're both in the same spot, which is we took the 5th and 6th guy in the quarterback class in the top 12 picks, and neither one of us are sure that they're going to be a long-term answer. What do we do, right? Like they're both staring down that barrel in 2026, and I would have dread as well.
Yeah, I was gonna employ the classic comedy mechanic, bringing it back around just to tie it all back together. Falcons fans better off than Vikings fans right now, and that's how we started the show.
There's always next year, EJ. There's always next year, or the year after that, or the
or
after that.
If you're talking about the Bears before this year, the next 3 decades.
There's always the lifetime after that, EJ.
That's right.
I want to thank all of our executive producers over on the Patreon: Fitzy, Connor, Liam, Mike, Jack, Major, Owen, Spencer, and Consti. Once again, all of our patrons, we love you guys. And we'll be back here in a few days. And I'm not entirely sure what the topic of the next episode is going to be, but we will be back here in a few days. And of course, on the Patreon, we'll have a patron exclusive show as well. So until then, later.